Hey parents, Carmine here with your video review of Batman Arkham Knight.
Time to die, old man.
Batman is one of those rare superheroes that I find pretty relatable. He isn't an alien, he doesn't have superhuman abilities, he's just a guy with some really good martial arts training, a boatload of money, some cool gadgets, and a strict sense of justice. But my opinion of Batman falters at his strict code of ethics. If all of your enemies know that you will never let anyone die, even the most sadistic serial killers, why should your enemies ever be scared of you? Batman Arkham Knight answered this for me in a way that left me with mixed feelings. There isn't a fine line between killing someone and doing nothing. In fact, there's a gaping chasm with plenty of awful things, and the Batman in Arkham Knight delves deep into that chasm. The gameplay-related violence is fairly benign. As with other Batman games, the player in Arkham Knight will punch, kick, and hit enemies with a variety of non-lethal gadgets and weapons. Despite the issues I'll bring up in a moment, the game does its best to communicate the fact that Batman, true to his nature, uses non-lethal tactics on all of his enemies, and as a result, Batman hardly ever makes anyone bleed. He might break bones, dislocate joints, and do other things that at best would send someone to the hospital, but he never kills anyone. Or does he? Imagine for a moment that two people are fighting in a back alley. One fighter, we'll call him Brucey, grabs the other, we'll call him Sluggo, by the back of the head and slams Sluggo into a circuit board so hard that the board is completely broken and Sluggo is electrocuted. In real life, unless I have a complete misunderstanding of amps and volts, Sluggo would be dead, or pretty close to being dead. But in Arkham Knight, the enemies that Batman does this to are just unconscious. Batman can slam an industrial light fixture onto an enemy, one that would leave horrific burns even if it didn't instantly electrocute the target, but with no obvious permanent damage in the game. And this also doesn't mention the fact that Batman now uses the Batmobile to get around town. In the Batmobile, the player can run over enemies. Sure, the enemies might get zapped by electrified wheel wells, but they're still being hit by a tank rolling down the street at 60 miles an hour, electrocuted, and then thrown dozens of feet across the road. Generally, I'm pretty relaxed about the artistic license that games tend to have with their violence, and that goes in both directions of the violence spectrum, but if this weren't a Batman game, those enemies would be 100% certified dead. There is some additional violence in the game that's worth mentioning as well. While Batman may have a strict code of ethics, the villains in this game have no such reservations. But for the most part, this doesn't increase the overall level of violence in any significant way. One of the few exceptions that I found came from the villain called Pig. Pig mutilates his victims and leaves many of them crucified around Gotham for Batman to find. When Batman eventually finds and confronts the madman, Pig is in the middle of a surgery with a live victim. It's not overly graphic, but it does stand out from the rest of the content.
Pig make.
That had better be you, and you had better be sorry.
Sexuality is basically non-existent, and I couldn't find any noteworthy examples of substance use, but Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, and Catwoman are definitely worth mentioning, especially Poison Ivy, who seems to prefer walking around in her underwear. Look, I get it. She tries to sport the whole just woke up after sleeping over at my boyfriend's look, but it's midnight in Gotham. She's gonna catch hypothermia. Put some pants on, Ivy.
What are you doing here?
Fred? You son of a bitch! You cut my communications!
Mature language is present, but overall pretty rare. I heard it from some of the random characters while I was driving around the city, and like you just heard, it is present in certain cutscenes, but overall it's pretty non-existent. Certain characters may make use of mature language more than others, but after scrubbing hours of footage, I had trouble coming up with many noteworthy examples to use in this video. This will probably be the last game in the Arkham series. I say probably because series seem to have a habit of concluding themselves and then getting revived later on. But overall, I think it was a good note for the series to go out on, and the Batman and Joker interactions were always surprising and entertaining. But because of the relative lack of mature content, despite Batman's near homicidal tendencies, we gave this game a recommended age of 12 years old. I have seen your requests and I will get to them, but next up I'm going to review Quantum Break, so look for that coming soon.